Welcome to Electric Zombie Breakout, the show that celebrates every human's capacity for high adventure, intellectual frontiersmanship, and nerdy, niched-out hobbies, pastimes, and careers. We kind of want to get away from device addiction, similar to the way the BBC challenged the TV addiction to kids and teenagers in the 1970s with their iconic show, Why Don't You? Like television, the internet and its attendant technologies are amazing, their potential vistas and applications even more so. So we're not anti-tech, we're just pro-adventure and into different and disparate realms of intellectual exploration, or even just ways of reclaiming well-being. We just want to tweak the ratios a bit. I suppose we're a bit more interested in people who play electric violin on roller skates using real thunderstorms as stage and orchestra, or garage scientists whose hobbies include repurposing tech like Google Translate to decipher dolphin speak. Electric Zombie Breakout has a broader, deeper agenda than Why Don't You, and is not specifically for younglings. Electric Zombie Breakout is for any sentient being who is interested in hobbies, pastimes, recreation, or careers. In fact, because sometimes frank, nuanced, and pragmatic conversations with adult themes may occur, we do advise parental guidance. So, that said, please enjoy, sit back, grab some coffee and listen to our first guest on the Electric Zombie Breakout, Daniel Love. Today we have Daniel Love, a lifelong lucid dreamer, a lucid dream teacher, a beloved YouTuber and author of Are You Dreaming?, Lucid and Studies in Dreams. Hello, Daniel.
Hi there, Rusty. Is Rusty the right name to call you? Is that am I right there?
Yeah, you can. My late mother would call me Russell when appropriate, but yeah, you absolutely can call me Rusty. It's my Cher, Sting, Prince name.
Well, if you're being naughty, I'll call you Russell. But,
yes. Careful now. So welcome, Daniel. Now we'll probably integrate the books into the conversation as we go.
Sure.
I dare say we should define lucid dreaming. Do you want to do that one for me?
Yeah, it's a good idea, actually, because I think a lot of people have the wrong end of the stick. So a lucid dream isn't just knowing that you're dreaming. It's a dream in which you are aware that you're dreaming. You have a full, logical, cognizant mind and the knowledge that you're dreaming. So simply knowing that you're dreaming isn't enough if you're not also logical enough to understand what that information means. So it's having a mind similar to your waking brain inside of a dream with the knowledge that you're dreaming, which then turns it into essentially nature's biological virtual reality.
So but the problem with that, it's not an easy thing to accomplish, is it? It's a bit like a martial art or playing the violin. This is not something that, and it seems as if nature has wired us not to be able to take it on easily. I don't know if that's just evolution stubbing its toe, or whether there's some kind of survival trait built into why we can't do it easily.
That's a really good point. So, yeah, you're right in saying it's not easy to become a regular lucid dreamer. I think that's probably a distinction worth making. So, having a lucid dream itself can be quite easy and it can be spontaneous. Being able to do that at will, or as close to will as possible, does take possibly a couple of years for most people of quite consistent effort. As for why, nobody really knows, but you're right in thinking there might be an evolutionary adaptation there. Possibly our ancestors who couldn't distinguish between dreams and waking life would have possibly been at a disadvantage. That might be one reason for it. But the answer is nobody really knows why. It's as tricky as it is. And some people do claim to have almost nightly lucid dreams. I've not seen any evidence of that in the sleep lab. Certainly no one's ever come forward and been able to prove that, but you hear a lot of people saying that online. So maybe there's a particular genetic trait which sets some people aside from the majority, but for most people, about 3 months of practice will give them their first lucid dream, sometimes much shorter, and about 2 years of very persistent practice doing the right thing, which is important, will then lead to maybe 3 or 4 lucid dreams a week if they're lucky.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes when I talk about lucid dreaming to somebody, and you get this often quite a pompous response. Oh, yes, that. I do that all the time. And I'm thinking, nah, no, you don't, mate. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, most of the time when I've heard that, it generally seems to be just a definition issue. So
Yes.
a lot of people seem to think that vivid dreaming is lucid dreaming, or a vague knowledge that they're dreaming is a lucid dream. But I'm a bit of a stickler for these things, and really it has to be that full cognizant mindset with very meaningful logic. So it's, if you know that it's a dream but you're not behaving as if you know that it's a dream, so say you're being chased by a monster and you're taking the whole thing very seriously, even if you know that it's a dream, if you're not behaving like you know it's a dream, then it's probably not a lucid dream.
Yeah, I've had that classic recently as well, whilst I've been your sort of student of having the dream where you dream your lucid dreaming. And that's
Crikey, those, yeah.
Yeah, that's a weird one, isn't it?
It does throw a spanner in the works. Essentially what this subject really is us exploring the nature of consciousness itself. So one thing which grinds my gears is people just using it as an escapism or sort of a quirk of psychology, when really we're pulling at threads of some of the deepest philosophical questions as to what it means to be human, to exist, to think. And those things aren't as simple as we'd like them to be.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you're not a veteran lucid dreaming, and lucid dreaming is a novelty to you, I mean, I've had probably about 30 or 40 in my life, half a dozen of those done willingly, but with volition. The rest random, being triggered by things. But the temptation is, when you're lucid, is to go flying and fornicating, isn't it? So, and one could be forgiven for that because it's like readily available. And I must say that classically, like an English lover, I only ever last 10 seconds in a lucid dream anyway. So my lovers in lucid dreams are going to be very, very disappointed. What about that? What about that sort of, like you say, you're on the coast of some cosmic discovery here, consciousness itself. I won't get too woo. And then the first thing is, I fancy a night with Kat Dennings, or let's fly, How do you feel about that?
It's certainly not unusual. I think there's multiple reasons for that. So the fornicating side, let's just get that out of the way. It's the awkward elephant in the room. Let's get the uglies out of the way. Yeah. So before REM, rapid eye movement, was discovered, the only physical sign that someone was dreaming was, I don't know what we can say on your podcast, but
anything you want, because we've got the power of edit. But be frank, it's all right.
Okay. So genital engorgement. Okay. Yeah. So basically, before rapid eye movement was discovered, and really that was a very recent discovery, I believe the 50s, might have been the 60s. The only thing that demonstrated someone was dreaming, other than sort of twitching body and that sort of thing, was that they were aroused. So you can use your imagination for what that means.
Well, yeah, so morning glory and REM are part and parcel of each other, aren't they? And I'm sure there's probably a female equivalent as well.
Exactly, yes. So that was, sleep labs were a slightly more unusual place back in the day. It's not surprising then that if that's occurring physically, that might influence the content of your dreams. So there is a connection between erotic dreams and dreaming, but also the mind, when it's in REM, is quite drunk on the chemistry of sleep. So most people, when they get lucid, they're not at that hyper logical, clear-minded state. They're just above the threshold to be present. And just above the threshold is very similar to being a little bit tipsy. So you're more likely to indulge in those base instincts to start with. The goal of long-term lucid dreaming is to get past that. So what I suggest to people is to do a pre-flight check. So when you do realize you're dreaming, not to just jump into the action and go with your instincts, because that will lead to these fun but disappointing in the long-term dreams. But to take a moment just to really assess what it means to be dreaming, and to bring online all of those other aspects of the brain. That said, it's absolutely fine to enjoy lucid dreaming that way if you want to, but the fun of it will run out very quickly if that's all you do. I think we're given this amazing gift. It's essentially a genie in a lamp that can grant any wish. Of course, people are going to grant their sort of fundamental primitive wishes first, but once you move past that, then you can start to, if you're inclined to be philosophically driven, then there really is nothing better, in my opinion, to explore these questions.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and that's why I was going to later ask you about, when faced with this cosmic voyage of discovery and ontology, are you really going to learn to roller skate in your lucid dream? A lot of people see it as a training suite, don't they? So there is that aspect as well. And I think maybe I would do something that if I was a veteran, but I'd be much more interested in gaining lucidity, stabilizing the dream, and seeing what the subconscious / universe woo alert throws up, more than sort of like, oh well, I want to practice my tennis swing, get that a little bit, but do you know what I mean? I can't imagine that I'd be confronted by aliens and asking them, do they watch the Kardashians or something? You know what I mean? So.
And frankly, that side of lucid dreaming is greatly over-exaggerated. So one thing that listeners may not be aware of, I mean, this is an industry. There are many people making not a great living, but a living out of teaching lucid dreaming and selling books on lucid dreaming. Obviously, I do the same myself. But when you're in the industry of selling an idea or a skill, you want to package it in as positive a light as possible, with something that fixes everything. And a lot of people take that a bit too far. The reality is, say with learning a skill, most people aren't going to get to the level where they are having regular lucid dreams that are long enough for that to be a practical application. You'd be better off investing that time in your waking hours that you would be required for lucid dream practice into the actual skill. So it becomes a little bit silly to spend all that time learning to lucid dream when, if your goal is to learn the skill, then spend the time learning the skill. So be careful, those who are interested in the subject, not to get drawn into the hype. So things like dream healing, practicing skills, those things, no, it's just a massive exaggerating in marketing. Lucid dreaming, if anything, is an interesting philosophical doorway into, like you say, the subconscious and the mind. And what we do with that, I suppose, is down to the individual, but the real limitations are timing. So most lucid dreams will last between a minute to sort of 7 minutes. That's kind of a standard lucid dream length. It can go on for as long as 45 minutes, but you never know. So once the dream starts, you have to plan ahead whether, is this going to be a 5-minute lucid dream? Is it going to be a 30-minute lucid dream? I don't know. So you have to make a lot of contingency plans based on the potential length of the dream. So a lot of this is just trying to stay in the dream. A lot of it's trying to work with whatever dreamscape presents itself. So if you want to travel to Mars, but you find yourself in a basement car park, that's going to bring a whole bunch of different issues up as to whether you find yourself dreaming of being on the moon. So a lot of this really is just, it's more understanding how your mind works. And I think that's the true long-term driving force with this. If you're interested in psychology and philosophy, then this is the subject for you. If you're looking for some kind of band-aid to improve your skills or heal something, or even creativity, I don't think lucid dreaming offers a huge amount in that front. I know there are people out there who will be screaming at hearing this, but it's always very worth being aware that we're dealing with a fringe subject, barely understood, and there's a lot of hype and a lot of people marketing this in such a way that doesn't really reflect the reality.
People making claim to it, basically. I'm grateful for that, because I didn't really want to learn violin and roller skating and lucid dream. I'm interested in both of those things, but it just seems that if you get something, because it is such a rare gem, lucid dream. So I wasn't even being all kind of bourgeois and bohemian about it either. It's just It seems like it's such a rare gem, especially for a novice, that you really don't want to squander it on mundane stuff. You really want to sort of see what that ocean throws up on your beach, for want of a less crap metaphor. So yeah. The reason why I like you, Daniel, without being obsequious, is that you are nice and lean and secular. And I have noticed of late in your videos becoming more agnostic. Now, is that scientific humility? Because you're saying, look, there's all the supernatural sort of ideas. Look, for me personally, no, but hell, I'm only one person. Let's give it a try. Is that where you're coming from, a position of scientific humility?
It's so hard to really define this. And it's a brilliant question, because I wrestle with this all the time. I suppose my default approach is that lucid dreaming is a subject that stands alone. It's a tool, much like writing. You can write about anything. It doesn't, writing isn't inherently spiritual or inherently about, writing letters to a loved one or love poems, that sort of thing. It can be anything. So lucid dreaming is a tool, and it's down to the individual to use that how they wish. I also think it's very crass to impose one's own personal beliefs onto a subject, and I think a lot of people do that without really thinking too much. Whether or not I'm entirely agnostic individually, I would consider myself a relatively philosophical individual. I don't think you would throw yourself into a subject like this if you weren't, and maybe even spiritual, but I hesitate on that because
that's spiritual with a little s, isn't it? Basically, I mean, it's kind of just shorthand for the more ephemeral kind of aspect of mind.
Yeah, so I mean, the word itself has kind of lost any meaning, because spiritual could be someone who dabbles with crystal healing, or a very intense believer in Christianity, or you name it. There are as many varieties of spiritual as there are individuals. So I hesitate to use that word because it becomes meaningless. As a teacher, I think it's my responsibility to try to make myself as invisible in the process as possible and focus on the subject, because the subject is bigger than the individual teaching it. As my personal students who come to me for private tuition will know, I'm very happy to explore any kind of spiritual or philosophical interest they want to go down, and I do that myself. But it's not my job to be on a soapbox preaching about what I think the universe is all about. So I tend to go with what is, the standard scientific understanding, because that's the science just being another word for knowledge. It's
or honesty. I mean, science is honest, isn't it? I mean, I'm not necessarily saying
exactly. Yeah.
Some individual scientists can be a little bit dishonest about their egotistical agendas, but generally the scientific method is honest, isn't it? It doesn't lie to itself.
I suppose a good way to sort of clarify my position is I'm a huge fan of Carl Sagan. He had a major influence on my approach in life.
Me too. I'm having him as a dad in my next life. Sorry, woo alert. I'm having Carl Sagan as a dad in my next life. Yeah, carry on.
That would be amazing, wouldn't it? And so I try to, maybe emulate is the wrong word, but use his approach to teaching myself. Because I felt that he dealt with subjects in a way which was open-minded to the alternative ideas, but not overly apologetic for silliness. Because there's a lot of silliness out there. There's a lot of things which just, they don't even have consistent logic within themselves. So, and I probably am more on the Dawkins side than the Sagan side when it comes to my approach on YouTube, for example. I think that's how people see me, but my goal is to be more of a Sagan for lucid dreaming.
Well, that's the thing. Dawkins and Sagan are kind of like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, aren't they? Because it's like you want Dawkins on your side in a fight, but Sagan comes with a lot of affability as well as scientific honesty. And just seeing the way he handled the Dalai Lama, it was kind of like a patient parent. But
then even like I'm sure you're familiar with Sagan. His when he scanned his wife's brain waves and sent them off on the Voyager mission. There was a lot of optimism about what aliens could do with that information, and the romance and the open-mindedness to any possibility was there. That sort of childlike wonder was still present. And I think that's important. So a lot of people paint me as this sort of cold-hearted materialist, but I wouldn't really say that. I just think I'd rather what I say be true than be appealing.
But that's how you find the gems. When you know, it's like, I remember there was a TV commercial in the 1970s where they painted and perfumed a flower, which is kind of unnecessary, you know,
Yeah.
and they make that point. And the same is true of like reality. You know, reality is bizarre enough as it is without you having to embellish it with like cheap plastic folklore.
Absolutely. I mean, it couldn't be more bonkers if it tried. It's the fact that we don't all go insane with just how strange existence is surprising in itself. So we don't need to add fictional and the fictional constructs, these sort of the reality shifting ideas, that sort of thing, are so dumb compared to the complexity of existence.
Yeah, they're less fantastic than what is
Yeah.
out there. And microscopes and telescopes will give you all the magic you need and then some, you know?
Yeah, so why people need that, I've never fully understood it. I guess
It's lack of imagination. Oops, bit of bigotry on my
Yep.
part there. But it is.
I'll let you be the one who says that.
Yeah, you get me, because you're used to being abused, so I'll get that. Now, so I want to ask about the physics of dreaming in a way, because it has its own set of physics. Like text doesn't hang around for long, and light switches are not very effective. And
Yeah.
now I think I saw in a video of yours that's based all of the, you know, because when you're in dream mode, you're working with the palette of memory rather than the palette of live sensory input. So is that why? So is that why the switches don't work and text doesn't hang around? And indeed, you don't experience life as an octopus, or you don't see other colours, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, so just to prefix this before I go any further, no one knows for certain with this, so most of it's speculation. But the things we do know, our experience of reality when we're awake is predicated on the information our senses provide us. So right now you feel like you're interfacing with reality directly, but what's really happening is a whole bunch of information is coming in through your senses. It's converted into signals and then translated and deciphered by the brain and turned into essentially a mental model, which is a result. And you only ever experience the mental model, but that's a mental model tethered to sensory input. And the sensory input is stable because it's outside of the mind. When we're dreaming, we're living in that same mental model, only it's tethered to memory and emotions and no stable, consistent objects. So when you look at a clock in waking life and look away and look back again, the time is going to be the same. In the dream world, nothing actually exists at all. It's all entirely the thing you look at that moment exists as long as it's being perceived. If exists is even the right word, it's a phantasm based on that momentary passing thought that has been made seemingly physical by the mind. So the fact that anything is as stable as it is in dreams is in its own way quite surprising, but I suppose that's simply the nature of memory. As for things like light switches, it was Keith Hearn, I believe, who discovered that effect, and it does seem to be relatively consistent. I don't know why that happens. I expect Hearn believes it's to do with the brain being unable to make sudden changes in lighting in dreams, so I'm not entirely sure of that.
I've had another explanation. And that was, light switches are not part of the primal brain. Sunsets and oceans are, but light switches aren't. Yeah.
In fact, I think I even mentioned that in my book, Are You Dreaming, actually. Thank you for reminding me. So,
getting as many gratuitous plugs as you like.
So I suppose the analog world versus the digital world. Let's move away from light switches because I think that's slightly, it's a weird middle ground. But say, for example, digital clocks and text, they they're abstract systems that they seem simple to us once we've learned them, but when you think about the amount of time it took to learn what these random symbols mean, and to sort of construct things around those, there's a lot of complexity going on there. And it's not natural. It's not something that we evolved and our pre-human ancestors evolved to deal with. Yeah, it's a mysterious one, but it's fortunate that it exists, because otherwise we wouldn't really be able to achieve lucidity anywhere near as much as we can. So the instabilities in the dream world really are the key to unlocking it.
Oh, I never thought about that. Yeah, the sort of capricious modes make that's your. I loved your thing about shouting to the idiot across the void. It's the things that allow you to sort of see, if you are in normal dreaming state and you see a purple two-headed cat, you are interested. You say, oh, look, a purple two-headed cat. Isn't that interesting? Whereas what you should be doing, of course, is like having some kind of existential, ontological, scientific orgasm. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh yeah, purple two-headed cat. Oh yeah, you don't see those many of those, do you? And so yes, it's the inconsistencies. I never thought it in that way, because that you kind of nicely boiled down all the dream testing techniques, and we won't go into all of that. That's what your videos and your books are for.
Yeah.
But spot the difference is possibly the best sort of anchor when you look at all the files and dials and wilds and back to bed and blah 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 blah.
And so dials,
yeah, and I'm not dragging you down there, don't worry. But spot the difference is the trick, isn't it? Really.
Pretty much that, yeah. Interdimensional spot the difference. That is the game we're playing as
smart.
And it's, when you think of it that way, it really is just about being present, being logical, performing experiments. It's essentially the difference between autopilot and present. Probably an easier way to put it would be, are you familiar with System 1 and System 2 thinking?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so essentially the brain has, this is vastly oversimplifying how the brain works, but it's a useful way of looking at things. Fast thinking and slow thinking. So when you learn to drive, for example, it takes forever. You have to think about everything. It's high calorie thinking, just getting used to a gear stick, it's confusing because you've also got the mirrors and the wheel and everything else to think about. But then it all becomes autopilot. So the brain tends to run either on autopilot, where everything's automated. You don't have to think about when you're making a cup of tea, you just do it. You don't need to think about driving once you've learned it, you just do it. But present thinking, slow thinking, that's high calorie, intense, present moment thinking. And that is what we're trying to take into the dream world. That is what makes a dream lucid. And most dreams are in fast thinking autopilot mode. And I have a personal theory for that, which is essentially when we experience novel things or learn a new skill during our waking hours, our dreams are basically converting novel experiences into autopilot experiences. So it's automating these new skills.
Kind of hard-learned skills into reflexes.
Exactly, yeah. So it's not surprising. So this is one possible reason why dreams are non-lucid by default, because their entire role is to make everything automated. So we're running on an automated system. And lucidity is basically throwing a massive spanner in the works for that process and possibly, making that not do the job properly. So what most people don't think about is how often they're in autopilot during waking life. And there are levels of that as well. So it's not like it's this binary thing where you're fully on autopilot or you're fully present. But, right now we're having a conversation and we're aware of the conversation and we're vaguely aware of the things going on around us. But, you phase in and out of focus, right? And most of us spend more time in autopilot than we do in presence. Some people call it mindfulness, but that sort of starts to pull on the threads of woo.
That's a gateway, isn't it? That's a gateway drug, mindfulness, yeah.
But essentially, we're just trying to be aware that consciousness and self are this constantly changing process. It's not one thing or another. It's not on or off. And lucidity is about becoming aware of that, learning how your mind works, learning what distracts you, and then countering that a little. So it's not only spot the difference for the world you're in, but spot the difference with the nature of self.
Coincidentally, this morning I was returning a hire car and a young lady brought me back. Her name was Nivea, and she may or may not work for Bedford Enterprise, but I was telling her that I was going to be interviewing you tonight, and I said, have you heard of lucid dreaming? And she said, oh yes, I have had one. And she explained this experience to me, her lucid dream, and I knew she was telling the truth and being very authentic because uncommonly, or maybe not, you can disabuse me of any assumptions, she had one and only lucid dream in her life. She became lucid, she became aware of it, and she was locked in. And which most of your students, including me, would kill for, locked into a lucid dream.
Oh, as in unable to wake up from
unable, yeah, there she was, and she was lucid, so it wasn't like a nightmare, an unconscious nightmare. She was locked into a lucid dream, and she decided to interact with it. And this is leading me into the kind of character classes, the taxonomy of entities there. And she said that she told one of the dream characters that she was dreaming, and this dream character kind of organised a mob to chase after her. Now, why? I'm going to talk about dream characters very briefly. Why do dream characters get pissed off when you tell them that they are? I mean, why? What are they? And I've heard this so many times, and from her, who's not an experienced lucid dreamer, she just had one in her life. She wasn't being all bombastic and self-important. She was adorable. And she sort of like said, yeah, and they started chasing me, and they were really angry with me because I said, look, I'm dreaming you. It's like, what's going on there? Why is there a reaction like that in the old subconscious?
It's interesting, and you're right. I've heard this so many times. I've never experienced it myself, actually. So I don't think it's a default behaviour. It is interesting that one question would be, has she seen the film Inception? Because that's part of the plot line of Inception, isn't it? The
yes.
Sort of dream characters coming in to stop that process. I think it's become a bit of a cultural meme in some ways. And, even if you're not fully aware of it, maybe it's sunk into a lot of people's expectational programming.
Yeah, that would naturally filter into hers and a lot of other people's subconscious. That's loaded.
Yeah, and but maybe, if that's not the case, which we can't say that it definitely is, if you go down the sort of slightly more woo side of things, potentially the human brain houses multiple forms of consciousness. It's impossible to know. We do know that the brain is made up of all these different functions. Maybe there's some kind of functional awareness for various parts of the brain. So perhaps when you're interacting with the dreaming brain, you're interacting with other semi-sentient parts of the community of self that makes up an individual, if that's true. Equally, I suppose we have a bunch of expectations as to how people would behave in waking life if we said certain things. So a lot of people, when they're in a lucid dream, they just start acting bonkers, shouting at people and screaming, "I'm dreaming," and all that sort of thing. And they get all the exact behaviors they would expect to see in waking life. So, if you want to see how something will be in a lucid dream, go and try it out in waking life. Go and tell everyone around you that you're dreaming when you're not, and you'll probably have a very similar experience.
Kind of thing, yeah. You're dreaming me, yeah, okay, mate. Keep taking the tablets.
Yeah. And obviously the dream world as well is sort of exaggerated ever so slightly, so there's a higher emotional energy running through it. So what would be someone calling you an idiot in waking life could then convert to a mob very quickly in the dream world. So most of this can be boiled down to expectations.
Yeah, primal fear of the pack turning on you and you becoming the outcast and all that kind of thing. I think you've already explained the other character classes. I mean, because I've experienced all of these, and I'm sure non-lucid and lucid dreamers have the kind of that stare, that dream character that stares at you, the death stare. I've had that,
Oh, yeah.
but it could be like, say, culturally influenced. So and then the kind of the grubby wretch, the sort of the disgusting character, which perhaps in Freudian and Jungian terms is your kind of low moral fibre kind of alter ego. I don't know.
And perhaps we all have our own inner language with this as well. Each of us is crafted from a lifetime of experiences, and we have our own sort of metaphorical language for how the world works. And this to me is the more fascinating side of exploring the dream world, is looking at the coding of your mind. And you can really get to explore what you really think about things. And even though sort of Jungian archetypes and that sort of thing are fascinating, I do think what's more fascinating than that is your personal archetypal system, which may be related, but probably is, the landscape of the mind is unique for each individual, because everyone's life has an entirely unique set of experiences. So those who are interested in this subject, I would say that's the true gem at the heart of this, is you get to realize that you're far more complicated and far more magical, for want of a better word, than you believe. Your experience of perceiving the world and being this individual self that things happen to is the basic interface so that you can survive. But the complexity underneath the hood that you get exposed to in the dream world is far, far deeper than that.
Wow, that's nice coming from somebody as secular as yourself, that you're kind of truly expanded and ontologically much smaller and bigger.
It's a weird, strange contradiction going on there, isn't it? But it's I mean, this is the wonder of dreams. There's a lot of seeming paradoxes, which once you really start to look at it, they work. They mesh together well.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a paradox if you add another dimension. If you see it from above, absolutely. All paradoxes disappear when you zoom out, don't they? I mean, so I guess lucid dreaming would be the same. I'm assuming. I'm hoping and assuming that is the case. Okay, so now when I was a child and a teenager and indeed a young adult, a lot of my dreams were phantasmagorical, because going back earlier when we were talking about being from the palette of memory rather than live sensory input. And now I'm interested in lucid dreaming. Phantasmagorical dreams would be a trigger, but I don't have them anymore. I have mundane dreams. I have very vivid, but they are, the physics is behaving itself. It's cars and houses and sunsets and people. Go on, shoot.
Yeah, so I think the reason for that, and unfortunately a lot of the reasons for the answers to these questions are not as exotic as people would like them to be.
Dope.
And it's frustrating because, once again, back to what we were talking about at the very start of the podcast, the marketing side of lucid dreaming does paint this misleading perspective, because we're creatures existing in a physical world that have to survive and get on with things. And there's a reason why children and teenagers and young adults find lucid dreaming easier than more mature adults, because their lives are somewhat more empty. Their imaginations are allowed to roam much more. They get to indulge in the fun stuff of youth.
It's more cemented in sort of real physics when you're older, isn't it?
The question to ask yourself is, how much of your time in waking life do you spend thinking about fantastical things compared to when you were a teenager or a child, for example? And then you'll soon realize, well, actually, it's pretty much a direct correlation between how fantastical my dreams are. So if you want your dreams to be a little more fantastical, start to feed your brain with more surreal content and daydream more. Spend more time in that state of mind when you're awake. So the dreaming mind is very much a mirror of your waking life. And essentially it's daydreaming with the brakes off. So what you daydream about and what you think about when you're awake will just be amplified when you're dreaming during sleep.
So a diet of fantasia then, like science fiction and fantasy and very visually opulent computer games could help?
It would help a great deal. I think the media fiction is this is one of the great things of lucid dreaming, because it's not about what you do just in your dreams. It becomes a lifestyle choice. So the menu of dreams will be based on how you feed your waking life. So, for example, as you may have seen in one of my videos, I decided to test lucid dream flying against skydiving, because I was very aware that I've flown so much in my dreams it becomes a normal part of my getting around the dream world. But how close was that to actually being 15,000 feet in the air? And so that's a case of the dream world inspiring waking life behaviours that then feed back into the dream world. And that, to me, is another of the hidden benefits of this subject, if you take it to its logical conclusion, that it's a two-way street. And what I discovered in that experiment, other than a passion for skydiving, which I've now taken up as a hobby, is that there were lots of things that were very similar. The mind was very good at assuming and projecting what that would be like, but it was missing some pretty obvious things like the rush of air and how that affects your hearing, the temperature, the little subtle details that the brain ignored or just didn't consider when trying to recreate that experience.
So it really does endorse that is working from a palette of memory then, doesn't it? Because there is definitely a kinesthetic sense in dreaming, isn't it? Physical touch is real. I don't know how the brain, but it also must be expensive calorifically to the old neurons, because in the few lucid dreams I've had, or nearly lucid dreams I've had, it's like, oh no, this isn't a dream because this is too real. I'm touching this, it's like it hurts my knuckles. So but it's lovely that the mind or the brain assumes and gets it wrong. So that gives you an opportunity, doesn't it?
Yeah. So a simple rule, basically, if it's missing from your dreams, it's probably missing from your waking life. So a lot of people don't have many dreams about the taste of food, for example. And what that's hinting at is that they're probably not being very mindful, there's that word again, when they're eating. So if you want to dream about eating and enjoying sumptuous banquets, then give a little more mental energy to eating when you're awake. That applies across the board. Your dreams will be what your life is and what you focus on.
Presence will amplify that, won't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to go into the murky subject of cheats, tips, and so-called hacks. And, of course, the obvious thing there, and we can do a hand wave, we can be dismissive and all the rest of it. Now, I know you don't like supplements and drugs. I get that, I really do. But if you accept that evolution hasn't given us the best, or, that we're not designed, that, we're just a toe-stubbed piece of flux, what's wrong with supplements? So I'll tell you my experience. It's not too down the dark path. Huperzine is perhaps my most successful, and I won't. But in terms of vividness, not actual. I didn't sort of spill over into lucidity. Some things do get you. I know that cannabis has the opposite effect. It cancels dreams, or anecdotally from cannabis smokers that I know. How do you feel? Well, I know how you feel, but you like the gymnasium more than you like some sort of elevator, some cheap, fast elevator, don't you?
Again, this is it boils down to various elements to this. So when I'm teaching online, when I'm dealing with the public, I have a responsibility for people's safety, and I'm aware that I'm not a trained medical professional. It becomes very apparent to you very quickly when you start teaching online or creating videos or having any kind of audience that one thing said offhand can lead to people making all sorts of assumptions and potentially taking unnecessary risks. So,
and a lawsuit or two.
Exactly, yeah. You just certainly don't want that either. So I will not promote. It's not my place to suggest supplements because I do not have the training for that. So it's not so much that I'm absolutely against those things. It's simply, if you're interested in that, you need to talk to someone with medical training and absolutely get their go ahead. Don't listen to random people online about what you put into your body. The human body, the human brain are these beautiful, delicately balanced things. And the people who produce a lot of supplements, a lot of these are thrown together in, very dodgy labs in strange parts of the world and shipped over in bulk. And they don't go through the things like the FDA.
It's a game of Russian roulette if ever there was one, basically, isn't it? It's like...
Yeah. But of course, I'm not naive enough to know that people won't take that risk with their own body. On the scientific level, the things like huperzine and galantamine are acetylcholine esterase inhibitors, which, not want to get too technical with it. So essentially there's a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, which is related to memory, presence, that sort of thing, just clear-mindedness.
Eat some eggs though, innit? Don't buy pills off some guy in Russia. Eat some eggs.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And acetylcholine is based on, choline is one part of that as a precursor. So if you're lacking in choline in your diet, you'll have less acetylcholine, which means you're likely to be less present in general and have a much worse memory. These things, so acetylcholine esterase inhibitors will influence dreams. Mostly they influence dream memory. So that's, the two-way stream of memory. So memory going into the dream world so that you can remember what you wanted to do when you're there, and recall of the dreams when you wake up. And they can also increase the length of REM. So undoubtedly they have an influence on dreams, and there's plenty of evidence that they do slightly increase your chances of lucid dreams. But most acetylcholine esterase inhibitors are prescription only. The reason huperzine A is popular now is because galantamine is mostly prescription, and the people selling galantamine originally needed to find a way around that. So that's why they all jumped ship to that particular variation. So you are dealing with a murky world of unregulated supplements. And frankly, the simple answer to this is you don't need them. And why take that risk? Why waste your money when you could just become slightly healthier and focus a little more? It's really the steroids versus working out at the gym naturally argument. So it's up to people to decide what they want to do. Personally, I will never promote supplements because I don't want to put other people's health at risk. But I'm aware that there's science behind them, but also we don't know what the long-term effects are. It may be that here's a possibility that you burn out your ability to lucid dream at all if you use them too often. That could be possible. We don't know. That's not something I'd want to risk.
No, and you've got your brain/mind and internal organs to think about as well, haven't you? So I've had enough lucid dreams. I've taken supplements on half a dozen occasions, and each time I've never gone lucid. I've had more vivid, but lucidity has come from other means, accidentally and with a little bit of willpower. But I'm going to, before I talk about the next potential cheat tip hack, you're not without a scientific backing, are you? What I mean is, you're not some self-appointed, like, bougie hippie guru looking there.
I'm sitting here surrounded by crystals and
yeah. I mean,
you've
got some kind of professional some backing here, haven't you?
Yeah. So this is what I do for a living, and this is the balancing act with everything that you do. So I'm very aware when I'm doing YouTube, you've got to keep it simple. The problem with that is simplicity then throws you in with all of the, self-appointed, I've read half of Stephen LeBerge's book and know Dialed and Wild, and I'm going to call them both techniques when they're not kind of people. So I try to keep things grounded in the scientific reality, but unfortunately, there's very little of that. As you've probably heard me saying so much on the channel recently, is we basically know nothing. You know, the research which is going on regarding lucid dreaming at the moment is so basic, it's absurd. It's literally like, does meditation influence our dreams? That's the kind of study which is being done. Yet if you go to communities for lucid dreaming, people are talking about these absurdly named techniques as if they're sort of some kind of written in stone, absolutely factual thing, which is the mismatch between what is known and what people claim is known is so huge. Really, anyone who explores the lucid dreaming mind is a pioneer. It's the most embryonic subject out there with virtually zero funding. The people who are doing research are mostly doing it as a passion project. Very few researchers stick with it, which is, again, unfortunate. But mostly due to, again, lack of funding, lack of support, and sort of, sadly, a fair bit of toxicity in the community as well. So,
yeah, there's a lot of mudslinging, just like there is in UFO culture. It's weird.
I'm not familiar with UFO
Oh,
culture.
I'm very.
I wish I was, actually.
Yeah, so. No, I mean, I am a aliens nerd. I live to meet aliens, and statistically, of course, they're out there. Even if they're rare, have they come to planet Earth? I don't think so. There's nothing here that makes me think they have, but I'm interested in them. And UFO culture is very, very polarized and mudslingy. It's a dirty game. It really is. And I've seen some of the trolling that you've had on your podcasts and sites as well.
Yeah, I think it's the subjects with very little research invite these sort of, I don't want to say self-appointed experts, but just people who get
say self-appointed experts, because that's what it is, isn't it?
Yeah, this sort of puffed up, sort of arrogant approach, and they don't like being told that that's impossible. You know, you can't be that thing because that thing can't exist in this field yet. We need another 10 years research, or maybe AI will speed this all up. But there's so much more that needs to be known before that anyone can call themselves a true expert, because that doesn't exist. I don't like using the term. For years I've avoided the term expert. I've adopted it recently a bit more, simply because 40 years of lucid dreaming and doing it as a career feels like maybe I can afford myself that title now. But that's more so in the case of an expert in teaching the subject, but not so much in being able to tell you all the gospel facts about the subject, because there simply aren't them. Most of what I have to say to people is, we don't know. Stop trying to pretend we do. So
I'm going to direct everybody via the show notes to your various sites and books and videos for the how-tos, because that how-to is a long game. It is like learning a martial art or a violin. It's a long game, and I think that's so. I'm not, like I said, I promised you I wouldn't get bogged down in that, but I'm still on the subject of cheats, hacks, and tips.
Sure.
And what could I not just go to a very, very renowned, expensive hypnotist to help me get triggered into lucidity in a dream?
If only it were that simple. It would be wonderful. So I worked with a renowned hypnotist many years ago, actually, and we explored that in great depth.
Oh.
And no, and LaBerge has done the same. Various other researchers have looked into hypnosis. The thing to remember with lucidity is you have one job. Your job is to be present. And hypnosis isn't about presence. It's about programming the subconscious mind.
Yeah, it's about mashed mind, isn't it? You're right. It's a compliant state of mind, of course.
Yeah, so it's the exact opposite of the state we want.
Yeah.
So the closest thing to lucidity is logic and presence. So hypnosis, it just you can't hack it out. If you want to hack, there is a very, very simple hack is the wrong word, but very simple lifestyle change that will massively increase your chances, which is go to bed an hour earlier. So it's really that simple. Or even better still, after you've woken up in the morning, stay awake for an hour and then go back to bed for a nap. That will increase your lucidity so much. And to be quite frank, that is the majority of my lucid dreams occur in morning naps. But at the same time, I'm aware that not everyone has the luxury to do that. So an hour's sleep added to the beginning of the night will have a similar effect.
Actually, you mentioned something very potent and powerful that we barely touched upon in this conversation, and that is presence of mind. Yes, we get that, but critical thinking, actually learned critical thinking, stringent, reductionist, spot the difference, critical thinking. So it might even be worth reading books on critical thinking or doing a Udemy course or whatever, to that end, to become a thinker rather than a reactor.
Absolutely spot on. So that is, I mean, lucid, that's another word for, or another meaning for lucid is, to be critical and present, isn't it? That's the lucid in lucid dreaming, and it's oddly lacking. So for example, with things such as reality testing, where lots of different ways you can define reality tests, but let's say something as simple as pinching your nose and trying to breathe through it. That's essentially a small experiment you're performing where the results will be different. You spot the difference, whether you're awake or whether you're dreaming. But if you don't approach it with a logical, critical thinking mind, you can perform the experiment but get distracted from what it is you're doing, to not really analyze what the data's telling you, to not really to go off on a tangent.
I caught myself doing that so many times where there's 5 little reality tests I do while I'm at work, and I have caught myself A, not completing the 5, and B, twiddle my thumbs, yeah, okay, yeah. What's that? Does that say anything? Yeah. Oh, hello. And it's so I have discovered through this, and I have had I have had an increased frequency, albeit very short dreams. I mean, 5-6 seconds, 30 the longest, but increased frequency. I have found that I must have been a daydreaming, drooling idiot for 59 years. Do you know what I mean? It's just like
we all are. We all are.
Yeah, I was just like, how asleep have I been?
This is why I talk so often about the importance of humility, and it's sorely lacking in all of us. We all have a very inflated sense of our own intelligence, our own ability to discern things, and this subject, if ever there was a subject that just smacks you around the face with a big kipper of humility, it is lucid dreaming. Because you realize, like you say, you spend most of your time on autopilot, bumbling through life. And even when you're trying to do these things to be more present, your brain, doing what it does perfectly naturally, tries to automate those things. So you start doing the nose pinch test on autopilot, which isn't what the point is. So
no, exactly.
So we're fighting our tendencies.
That's exactly right, and it does give you humility, not just from like a microbe in an infinite universe kind of a way, but also because I won't talk about anybody else, but there's a lot of my dream characters that don't like me. And they've got some valid points, and so yeah, that's true. So it is. I wouldn't say humiliating, humbling, isn't it? Right. Okay. I think you've mentioned this before. No, you have mentioned this before, and I think it's crucial. And I'm going to be a bit browbeaty here, right? You have mentioned documentary. Now, when you mentioned this documentary in one of your videos, I made the suggestion that you go the peer funding route, that you had a ready-made audience in your quite beloved audience. They love you and you love them back. It's a lovely, warm, friendly audience, right? So I made the point that you should go the peer funding route with your already, sort of quite significant number of people. And it was met with silence. Now, I'm not offended. I wondered, and I'll cut this out of the show if there's a reason for this. If you don't make it, somebody stupid will. Mentioning no names.
Yeah. That is a point.
No, it's going to happen. And I have had a life of pain myself from always being ahead of the zeitgeist in my little introverted, daydreamy kind of a way, and never getting the idea out in time. The lucid dreaming documentary or documentary series is coming, and it will be crap. Do you not feel a sense of urgency to get this done, right? And bearing in mind what's touring around Netflix at the moment and on Discovery Channel and National Geographic, there's some beautiful documentaries on all of those channels, and I'm not mentioning names, but you know which ones are the silly ones. That's what's going to happen. Where's your sense of urgency, Daniel?
My sense of urgency has been beaten out of me slightly with the constant wave of twaddle that has been in this subject since I've been here. There's been no break in it. There'll be twaddle documentaries. There already are some, actually. I believe you said you left a comment. Maybe you commented in the live stream with that. Am I right?
Maybe I can't remember when, but I just the twaddle documentaries exist, and they haven't sullied your potential gorgeous documentary, your cinema release documentary, or your 12-part Giorgio Tsoukalos funded documentary, right? It's just I just feel you ought to make it, because it look, the internet is awash with crap about lucid dreaming. TV and film platforms aren't, and including the one, what's it called? It's gone now. Curiosity Stream. It's not. There's plenty of room for a really beautiful documentary or documentary series, and so although there is twaddle out there, you've got time yet, and
it is a mission. It is on my to-do list, but I always like to get things right. And also the funding aspect of this. So you mentioned crowdfunding. It's very difficult with this subject. There are so few people genuinely interested in lucid dreaming that there's a big market. If you want to come up with a machine that doesn't work, that promises to give you lucid dreams, you'll get, several 100,000 for that, and disappoint a huge number of people. If you try to do something a little more nuanced, that isn't promising lucid dreams, very difficult to get the funding. I've done a crowdfunding project in the past, which the act of doing a crowdfunder is a full-time job. And when I say full-time, it's sort of from 7 a.m. till way past midnight for every day.
You really do. You really do need to put some quite lush proposals up on crowdfunding sites. It's not a case of, I've had this brilliant idea. They require almost always, at the very least, a very plush PowerPoint presentation will probably not be enough, So you will get lost amongst the real professionals, and like I say, it could take weeks.
So if there are any crazy millionaires out there who want to become a patron and have a lucid dreaming documentary made in their name, give me a shout and we'll get started tomorrow.
Well, I suspect there's one or two in your audience, because it's not tiny, your audience, is it? We'll bung you a tenner each, I'm sure. Do you know what I mean? So I'll give you a tenner that I won't call back. You won't even have to give me like a little free DVD or anything, if such things still exist.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, it's something I would very much like to do, but it's trying to balance time is very difficult with this, and also getting it exactly right, because I'm also very aware that certainly over the years, my views on lucid dreaming have changed a lot, and I'm aware that is an ongoing process. I think that's healthy and natural and necessary. And I want to make sure that when that documentary is made, that I don't make the rubbish one. If other people want to do that and make rubbish ones, let them. But when I do it, I will make sure that I feel 100% proud in that moment. So it's a tricky one. I understand your sense of urgency with that, and I share it, but at the same time, with a slight caution to wanting to get it exactly right.
Now, I have this concept. I wonder how much of a probability calculator the old subconscious is. For example, right, let's say I'm a nerd and I want the best chance of finding extraterrestrial life. So I take so in my subconscious is every book I've ever read, every documentary, every Fermi paradox explanation. It's all inside the old noodle, right? Mm-hmm. So can I land in my subconscious in a lucid dream and say, right, old oracle of mine, What is the best candidate for? I'm not drawing upon any metaphysical or telepathy or psychic, but from like subconscious calculations. What is the best candidate in the known astronomy for extraterrestrial life? Can it make those kind of guesses?
I think if you were very thorough with your research and someone with a high enough intellect, possibly. There have been examples of scientists using their profound knowledge of a subject to use their dreams to go that extra step. I suppose it's similar to what's going on with the large language models at the moment, where, the problem with the human brain is it's so good at deceiving itself.
Okay.
And dreams will give you incredibly convincing answers, or at least you'll be incredibly convinced by them until you start to pick them apart. It's a really difficult one, because I would love what you're saying to be true. I've not seen enough compelling evidence in my own experience with that.
It's not a technical oracle. It's not some great deep thought ChatGPT. It isn't that, is it? That's the thing. So, although it kind of could be if you were wired that way.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's what it boils down to: is how smart are you actually, and how much do you really know? And also just the luck of the draw with the kind of dream you're having. Which parts of the brain are functional at that time. Because I think it's important to remember that not all lucid dreams and not all dreams are equal. Different parts of the brain will be online or not, depending on the particular dream. So a lot of this depends on, it's a lot like weather. The conditions have to be absolutely right. And I think the more people look at the dreaming mind as a weather system, the more you sort of develop a tolerance, or the tolerance which is required to continue with this subject. It's a bit like a surfer. You can't surf every day.
No.
You can't have the best wave every day. But every now and then you will. And if your skills are honed exactly right at that time, and you've taken your part of the responsibility seriously, then you can make the most of it. And that's back to that "you have one job" statement that I made earlier, which is absolutely the most important thing. Your responsibility is presence, logical presence. And that really is the one thing you need to do as a lucid dreamer. All of the other hacks, all of the other stuff, just it's not relevant.
A quick anecdote. I had a very unwholesome relationship with my stepfather. I get triggered by dead people. That's how I can get accidental lucidity. So that's a very good trigger for me. And I met my stepfather, and we had a very unwholesome relationship, very cruel and nasty relationship. And he was walking along looking ashamed. He was carrying a toolbox. I got triggered into lucidity, and I said, "Are you all right, mate?" And he said, and he looked up at me, and with the guilt and shame in his eyes, I said, "Everything's all right. Everything's all right. I'm not angry with you. I'm not even going to say I forgive you. That sounds pompous. Everything's all right between us, mate. It's okay." And I hated him for decades. And do you know what? And I took that on advice, I think, from Charlie Morley or somebody like that. That if you you had this kind of inception. I forgave my stepfather in a dream, and do you know what? I was all right with him from that point onwards. Now, that might have been psychosomatic on my part, or self-fulfilling. Is there an inception quality to those sorts of things, where you can sort of like maybe murder your own golems, or forgive a person, or say, "I want to be vegan"? Is there an inception quality?
I think so. I mean, we don't know for certain. That particular concept has... I don't know if there's a lucid dreaming teacher out there who doesn't suggest exactly this. So I think LaBerge talked about it, sort of the hugging the monster kind of approach, and pretty much everyone has echoed that since. And I've seen multiple accounts of students using dreams to deal with past issues. So, I mean, maybe that is the nature of dreaming anyway. I think when you look at, if you ask the question, why would nature develop dreams in the first place? What would be a primary purpose for that? And possibly just sort of emotional release and the tying up of loose ends, all of that. the mental processing you don't get to do when you're awake because you're too busy surviving. So we can speed up that process with lucid dreaming if you want to. Again, all of this said with speculative tone because there's no firm evidence for this, but anecdotally, and certainly in my experience as a teacher, I've seen multiple instances of this. You could argue that your brain was ready for that and there'd been a whole bunch of processing going on beforehand, and the dream was simply the punctuation at the end of the sentence.
Bit of chicken and egg kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, but I personally think we can use dreams for that. It's, if nothing else, it's such a compellingly perfect virtual reality that you get to live out that experience. You know, you get to genuinely be there and do that. And there's no denying that, you know, making amends with someone you had issues with, who has since passed, you know, you're not going to get a chance to do that anywhere else in life. So it's a powerful experience. So that makes perfect sense to me.
For you personally, not one single teasingly suggestible hint of anything paranormal, like a precognitive event or a message from a dead person or something like that, or shared dream space, in those 40 years, Daniel, that you could reasonably put beyond coincidence, has anything sort of like stayed with you? You thought, oh, do you know what, that's unresolved? A bit like the lucid dream equivalent of the wow signal.
I like that. Yeah, so certainly there's, I mean, I've had more than my fair share of seemingly paranormal experiences. I guess the question is how big is coincidence? How much does one understand the nature of chance? When you look at the number of dreams had in a 24-hour period on planet Earth, you know, 5 dreams per night per 8 billion people, you know, the numbers get pretty big. And that's nightly, every night on planet Earth, 5 times 8 billion. And the number of possible experiences of things that people can be dreaming about, suddenly
there are going to be some matches, aren't there, basically?
There are going to be some absurdly perfect matches, things that if it happened to you, you would convert to whatever thing it is that's telling you is happening. So I've had seemingly shared dreams. The standout one was from my teenage years, and so I doubt my memory of this because I don't know whether my recollection has been made more perfect. You know, sort of I've elaborated on that story over the years. But I had a particular friend at school, and we used to walk to school every day together, and one night we had a seemingly shared dream which we'd planned to have because she was also a lucid dreamer, and she introduced me to a friend in this dream. Next morning, walked to school together. First thing we say is, did you have that dream? Yes. The details were very similar. She mentions that she'd introduced me to this friend in the dream, and then 2 weeks later her friend comes to visit and it's the same person. So that seems incredibly beyond coincidence, doesn't it? So,
but then you've been doing this for 40 years and you're talking about a handful, aren't you?
Yeah, and we're also talking about something which happened when I was a teenager and whether or not I've told that story and made it more perfect over the years. Because certainly when I used to work as a magician, which many people may not be aware of, I used to do shows and, you know, perform these mind reading tricks for people and then go back to the same venue months later, and occasionally there'd be someone I performed for and they would recount to their friends the trick I did for them, only it wasn't the trick I did for them. It was some miraculous event, which if I could do that, I'd have become the world-renowned magician. So the human brain has a tendency to over-exaggerate with these things, and we're so good at deluding ourselves. So we have to be careful with that. I'd love for there to be a paranormal element to this. In fact, I'm sort of a disappointed paranormalist in some ways, because that's something... Yeah.
Very much the same here.
Yeah, I want it to be true, and I've just tried so much to find evidence for it. In fact, right now, the wardrobe by my bed has a couple of randomly picked playing cards on top of it, facing face up. I don't know what they are, but if I ever have a false awakening where I'm in my room, I will float up and look down at those cards, check them in the morning, and I've done this experiment
Now, well, on the subject of astral projection, right, okay, for me, it's a very sophisticated hallucination / dream, but what I will say about it is that it seems like it's a subset of a lucid dream, though, but the difference being that it's kind of very photoreal and doesn't tend to sort of tween in and out of shapes and textures and stuff. So what is happening in an astral projection, or what we will call an astral projection, OBE?
So I think there are probably multiple experiences that people have which they call astral projections. I think it's a bit of an umbrella term. I think the one that is most related to lucid dreams and possibly the most common experience is what some people call awake initiated lucid dream. I call them maintained awareness dreams. So it's where you fall asleep consciously straight into the dream. And the experience of that is sometimes an absolute perfect match with what people describe astral projection to be. So you'll sort of float out of your body, look down, see your body beneath you. You'll be in this perfect replication of your room. And those dreams are very stable. Well, sometimes they're stable, sometimes they're not. But most lucid dreams, when you're having a true lucid dream, aren't as weird as people think they are. They're generally quite...
They're quite conservative, aren't they? A lot of them, mundane reality, or echoes of.
Yeah, absolutely. So the word dream implies strangeness, but rarely, it's a rarity for dreams to be that strange. The thing that distinguishes what people call astral projection from a maintained awareness lucid dream is just the conclusion that's drawn. As we were talking about earlier, lucid dreaming requires these two elements: the knowledge that you're dreaming and a logical, critical mind. Now, if you have a dream with a logical, critical mind, that's a major element for a lucid dream. But if you're lacking the knowledge that it's a dream, what are you going to conclude is happening to you? So if you're someone with a belief in a soul or a belief in astral projection, and you've just floated out of your body and everything feels real, but you've concluded, okay, I floated out of my body. What's happened? I floated out of my body. I'm in my astral body. And they never make that step to conclude, well, actually, maybe I fell asleep, so this must be a dream. And then they would be in a lucid dream. The other astral projection experiences, Susan Blackmore, a very famous parapsychologist who was kind of the number one parapsychologist in the 80s and 90s in the UK.
Yeah, she had that OBE over Oxford, didn't she? She was stoned, I think.
So basically she just had a very intense stoned experience. And again, it was in her student years, so she was sort of young, very open-minded, very... wanting those things to be true, as we all do. I don't think is there a 20-year-old out there who doesn't want to discover the thing that changes the world?
What I like about that particular anecdote is that she said, look, Oxford was perfect photoreality. She was absolutely convinced that it was photoreality and therefore real, but she said the guttering, I think on the roof or something, was wrong. It was like anachronistic or something like that. And she said that was the one thing that kind of said, no, this isn't real. However, if... woo alert, right?
Yeah.
It could have been a parallel universe version of Oxford City. Yeah?
If you don't get that
Go on,
I love the idea of parallel universes. This is why I get so frustrated with reality shifting, because for years I've daydreamed about the concept of parallel realities and just how exciting that concept is. And reality shifting to me is just such a dumbing down of such a fascinating concept.
Agreed.
Which could well be true, but I really don't think that we humans can just really wish ourselves really hard into a parallel reality. I think if that were the case, then human history would be a very different shape. So
yeah, it would. I totally agree. But it was a lovely. And credit to her for sort of spotting that this guttering was the anomaly that kind of she wouldn't allow herself to believe that it was a full-on OBE, which was and
the fact is, I mean, to me, the thing which really stands out with her, and I recommend anyone who doesn't know about Susan Blackmore go and check out her work. She dedicated her career to this for, a couple of decades and tried so hard to find evidence for the paranormal. As someone who was a believer, genuinely wanted, she'd had her own experience. And after all of those years, trying again and again, never finding a shred of evidence. But being, this well-paid, sought-after expert on that subject, she was willing to be, there's that word again, humble enough to go, okay, I've tried as hard as I can. I've not found anything. I'm going to give up this well-known name that I've given myself in this career and dedicate myself to something where there will be evidence, and became...
And she married Tony Hart.
Oh, she did, didn't she? I forgot about that, yeah. She actually lives not too far away. I think she's down near Plymouth.
Are you Devon? Are you a Devon man?
I am down in the southwast, yeah.
Oh, okay, because I noticed that you noticed my scathing sort of remarks about Totnesian spiritual... Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've spent too many times in Totnes, so...
I lived in South Brent and Plymouth, so like right next.
But it's a nice place.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful, yes. And God damn it, they might be annoying, but the cafes and the bookshops are fabulous. So,
I love hippie culture. I absolutely adore it. I mean, I was in my teens and 20s in the 90s, so it's.
Well, Glastonbury's lovely as well, isn't it? So it's I've only ever been to the festival once. I went in 1992. That was the only time I've ever been to Glastonbury Festival. See Carter and the Levellers and various other bits.
Oh, I think I was at that one. Maybe we even ran into each other. Yeah, that was okay.
Were you? Excellent.
But yeah, hippie culture is great. It's a shame that the open-mindedness doesn't stop.
Yeah, stop at letting your brain fall out, kind of a thing. Yeah, magic, absolute magic. I mean, I have written down 100 lucid dreaming missions I intended to execute, but you kind of blown a few of them to smithereens, Daniel. Okay,
no.
I'll give you 21 on my list, right? Very quickly. 1, find an alien. Actually, I'll give you a lot less than that because I'm too embarrassed to mention the rest now. Find an alien PayPal. Find an alien pen pal, that's extraterrestrial pen pal, murdering my own golems, take a dream stabilizing pill inside my dream. This is a dream stabilizing pill, I will swallow this. 4, ask my brain about Einstein's last words. 5, find a dolphin and convince it to be my friend. 6, be something else, like a woman or an octopus or the colour blue, and so on and so forth. And somebody's idea that I plagiarised, it wasn't my own idea, which was getting pissed with Bigfoot. And that was, I thought that was a good thing to do inside a dream. But
I love all of these, they're great.
He's vanished. It turns out I was dreaming all of this. Or was it you that was dreaming? Either way, I'm going to thank my imaginary guest and recommend that if you are dreaming or interested in lucid dreaming, you should check out Daniel Love's books, which are available on Amazon. They include Are You Dreaming? Exploring Lucid Dreams, a comprehensive guide, and Lucid, the Tao of Dreaming. There's also another book by Mary Lucy Arnold Forster that Daniel and another writer, Morton Prince, have contributed to, Studies in Dreams, Lucid Dream Classics, digitally remastered. More on the subject of lucid dreaming, the how-tos, the what is, the science, the busting of pseudoscience, and fellow lucid dreamers, or ONEIRONAUTS as they're also known, can be found on Daniel's encyclopedic YouTube channel, Lucid Dream Portal. Be sure to check out the show notes for a comprehensive list of all the subjects covered, including the books and links to here and there, and where and how you can locate Daniel Love's work on lucid dreaming. Thank you, Daniel Love. You have been an amazing lucid guest. Thank you. Breakout.